Mama Hooch case from Christchurch, where up to around 30 young women were drugged and sexually assaulted. There will be others like that.
When we bring more awareness, once you guys have launched to Tika, because that is generally what people tend to find, right? Like one person comes out and then the rest kind of follow. Ellie Moore is one of New Zealand's most respected journalists and advocates for social justice. With more than 30 years' experience, she's led powerful storytelling across print, TV, radio, and online platforms, from Fair Go and Breakfast to leading the Me Too NZ project with Stuff. Her book, No Words for This, charts her journey through trauma, truth-telling, and accountability. Now her work with Tika brings all of that experience together, using technology to provide free legal help to survivors of sexual harm. Ellie, it is such a privilege to have you with us, so thank you for being here.
It's a delight to be here. Kia ora to everybody.
Could you please tell us about Tika, what it means, how it works, and what inspired you to co-found it?
Sure. So Tika in Te Ao Māori means justice and what is right. And when we started working on this project, the very first thing we did was go to Te Tōrewhiri Te Reo Māori and ask for permission to use that kupu, because it's a taonga for us, and to ask them whether it fit with what our mahi and our kaupapa is. And we were delighted when they came back and said yes. In this context, it means justice. And so we were really delighted to take that forward as our name. Tika is a brand new project for survivors of sexual harm in New Zealand. And what it is a new way to report sexual harm that you've experienced and to report it online. We have a platform that uses an algorithmic matching engine to bring together groups of people who've been harmed by the same perpetrator, and then we offer them legal advice and representation through their choice of justice pathway for free.
Awesome. That sounds amazing.
World first, actually, Ara.
Yeah, that's so cool. What change do you hope Tika will create for survivors in New Zealand?
Okay, so that's quite a big and broad question, but it's actually where we started right at the beginning, with asking ourselves what was the change that was needed. And both myself and my co-founder, the barrister Zoe Lawton, had done quite a lot of work in awareness raising since the Me Too worldwide explosion, I suppose, and we'd put significant effort into raising survivors' voices and making sure that they had a platform to be heard. However, at the end of a 5 or 6 year period, we realised that the rates of reporting, the number of people who have been harmed and then report it to authorities, was still incredibly low. So it's stuck below 10%, around 7 or 8%, and had been for more than a decade. So we were curious as to how, despite all the raised awareness, this didn't seem to have had an effect on the willingness of people and the comfort they felt to come forward and report what had happened to them. So we started looking at ways that we could change that. And we started with finding out the barriers that people face, according to them. So straight from the horse's mouth, what is stopping you from reporting what's happened to you? And the top one, according to New Zealand Police Research, is that if I'm a survivor, I might understand that something bad's happened to me, but I don't necessarily know how to name it or where it sits under the law. So confusion about the nature of the harm is a big one. Shame and self-blame, that's huge because of, societal attitudes. And it's unwarranted, of course, but it's real nevertheless. Fear of not being believed, that's another huge one. People know that perhaps they might have tried to tell friends or whānau or a colleague or a boss about what happened to them, and they've got a less than supportive response in that moment because the other person has panicked and said, oh, are you sure it was as bad as all that? That can really shut down a survivor and make them reluctant to ever tell anybody else.
Yeah.
And so they keep it to themselves forever, as I did for 40 years.
Yeah.
The research shows there's just a general reluctance to step into the legal space unsupported, because we hear a lot. All of us have heard about how re-traumatizing the criminal justice process can be for a survivor. I've spoken to so many survivors, Ara, who've said to me, who've been through a court process and have said to me, when I walked into the courtroom that day, Ali, I thought that lawyer over there was my lawyer. But then they said, no, that person works for the Crown. You don't have representation here. You're not a party to this matter. You're a witness. And that can be quite shocking and confronting for someone who has plucked up the courage to report what's happened to them. So our model at Tika is promising to provide groups of survivors, because there's real strength in collective action, in raising a complaint and standing together as a group, and giving them their lawyer.
Yeah.
So a Tika lawyer will represent them. We won't be the ones taking the prosecution, of course. That role belongs to the Crown Solicitor.
Yeah.
But we can make sure people are supported all the way through the process, have legal representation when they need it. Research overseas shows that independent legal representation, which currently doesn't exist for survivors, can be the most important thing in shaping their journey through the criminal justice system. So that's what we're proposing to offer. And we know that the cost of a lawyer can be prohibitive. So Tika is a registered charity, and we plan to provide our services for free. So the one caveat is, when we first start, at the moment anyway, you do need to be 18 to register with Tika. That's mainly because you need to verify your identity, and to do that you need a passport or a driver's license. So we're starting with 18. We're hoping very quickly, within the next few years, to bring that lower age limit down to 16, because we're very cognizant of the fact that a large amount of sexual harm happens to young people and rangatahi in this country. So you need to be 18. Much of your initial journey with Tika is automated. So we have a safe and very secure survivor-focused platform where you put a little bit of information about yourself. You register as a client with Tika, and you get immediate lawyer-client privilege, which is an important safety factor, keeps your information safe. And then you put a little bit of information about yourself, what happened to you, and about your perpetrator. And then the matching engine in the Tika platform starts to look for connections between the information that you've given and the information other people may have given about the same perpetrator. And then the groups are brought together. That is then surfaced by the platform to a human Tika lawyer, and they contact you and they let you know that a group has been formed, and then you're given individual legal advice about your options in your own lane. You don't meet at that stage.
Yeah.
So that's how it works.
Yeah, that's really cool how the technology you guys have formulated, and the model is kind of, trying to break down the barriers and stuff to access to legal services. We definitely found, when reading your book, that it was very interesting that there is an independent defense for the survivor themselves, which, you're right, that can be a very shocking revelation. With the idea of the three people that form the groups to start, do you think that your own personal experience being like a survivor 1 in 3 helped to kind of determine that number?
No, actually, those two things, that's interesting correlation to draw, but those two things are not connected. In my case, There were three of us. We eventually realised, after many decades of never breathing a word to a soul, I won't put too many spoilers in this podcast for people who haven't read the book, but in our case, the perpetrator admitted his criminal activities. So there was no need to rely on numbers to prove any case in our case. The choice of three to form a group, which may be able to change, may be able to be lowered over time. But the choice of three was really after consultation with people who work in the criminal justice system, including police. We settled on three because it tends to be the number, the best number to take a case forward. And it tends to provide a level of evidence that is stronger than an individual taking a case forward. So it's kind of arbitrary, but we've got to start somewhere. So we're starting with three, and we will see how it goes.
Yeah, awesome.
And there will be, of course, much larger groups. I mean, if you think of one of the most infamous cases in recent years is the Mama Hooch case from Christchurch, where up to around 30 young women were drugged and sexually assaulted by the managers of the Mama Hooch bar in central Christchurch. So that's a very big group, and there will be others like that in Aotearoa, New Zealand as well. So although three is the lower limit, I think we will find much bigger groups as well.
Yeah, I think it is really cool when we bring more awareness, once you guys have launched to Tika, because that is generally what people tend to find, right? Like one person comes out and then the rest kind of follow. Do you think that your marketing around Tika and stuff would include that, and how you enter in, and generally it's not just you, more people will come?
Very definitely. So that sense of community, I know as a survivor, was crucial for my own journey. And there will be a lot of people, I think, who will register for Tika who probably don't have any real driving need to enter into a justice process necessarily, but they would like to know, because they've long wondered whether their perpetrator has harmed anybody else. One of the most common things that I've spoken to thousands of survivors over the past few years, well, probably more than 1,000. Yeah. And I think there has been a point in every interaction or conversation or series of conversations I've had with a survivor where they have all said the same thing, or a version of the same thing, which is, I just don't want this to happen to anybody else. Yeah. So I think there will be a lot of survivors who, and remembering that you can register for Tika no matter when the harm happened to you. So you do have to be 18 or over to register at the moment, but you might have suffered child sexual harm, or in your adolescence or early teenage years, or at school, or it doesn't, and you might be 70 years old and registering for something that happened 50 years ago. That's fine. It doesn't matter when it happened in your life. I think there will be a lot of people who register not looking for any outcome for themselves, but wanting to help others, because that is the most common reason people give for why they have reported, that they want to stop the chain of harm. And that's what Tika is trying to do. We're trying to prevent harm by helping serial perpetrators understand that they will be caught.
You say that you can register for an offence that's happened multiple years ago. Do you think the time that has passed would affect someone's case, regardless of if they want to take it through the justice system or other avenues such as restorative justice?
They won't make any difference to us. We will be giving people legal advice on the best. I mean, the decision always remains with the survivor. It's up to them, and we Tika lawyers are bound to follow their instructions, right, as any lawyer is. But we can certainly give advice on what we think that the best course of action might be for their, for example, if you're a victim survivor of harassment at work, you're not necessarily going to be best to take a criminal complaint. You might want to take a civil complaint, or you might want a process through the Human Rights Commission and the OHRP. So we'll be giving that kind of advice. I think that the time elapsed between the event and the laying of a complaint or the beginning of an action can often be meaningful and make a difference, but not always. There are a number of, quite high profile cases. In fact, there's cases in the media all the time of people being convicted and jailed for historic sexual abuse. I think that if a lot of time is elapsed, it can be very helpful for there to be multiple complainants, because if the more people that have a memory of the same thing happening, even if it's 50 years ago, the stronger that evidence tends to be. So yes and no, I guess, and it depends on the case, on the individual case.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool that you have those professionals there to really lay out all of the options that the survivor has.
And I have to say, it's not me. I'm not a lawyer. I'm the only non-lawyer. So
you're pass that on.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Would you be able to kind of walk us through the process that would happen? Say you're registered and then you get a notification, is it, that you've formed that little group? Could you kind of walk us through the process of what that would look like for a survivor?
Sure. So we recognise that Tika cannot guarantee that you will get a match, today, tomorrow, next week, or ever.
Yeah.
Because obviously our service is a collective action service, and it relies on 3 or more people reporting to us about the same person. So that's the important thing. And we understand that on that basis alone, Tika won't be for everybody. If you want to urgently move forward with a criminal complaint, you should go to the police. And everybody still has that option, obviously, whether Tika exists or not. So sometimes survivors will get a match in a millisecond, and sometimes it will require patience and the willingness to wait until other people report the same person. When that happens, when a match is identified, it goes through several processes in the matching algorithm to make sure it is identified as a match above a certain percentage. And it's not until it reaches that threshold that it's surfaced to a human lawyer. And then a Tika lawyer checks each individual in the group's information that they've given to make sure that it isn't a false match. So that's important. That's an important safety feature. And then if it is identified as a very likely match, each person will be, you will get a notification from the system that will say you've got a match, and a Tika lawyer will be in touch. You can check that through your own personal dashboard at any time. And then you will be contacted through your preference of contact method. So let's say you've said it's okay to email me. You'll be contacted by a Tika lawyer, and they will make a time to physically go through your story with you and ask you more information about what happened to you, so that the lawyer can form an opinion on what might be best for you.
Yeah.
That legal advice is individual at this stage, so you don't meet the other people, and you're not advised of who they are either. You're just told there are 6 in the group.
Yeah.
You take that information away and you have a good think about it as a survivor, and then at a point in time in the future, let's say a month or so, although that time hasn't been set in stone yet. You will vote on your preference of legal pathways. So, and there are a bunch of them available. You can take a criminal complaint, lay a criminal complaint as a group. You can potentially lay a civil complaint. We don't do a lot of class action in this country, but we're hoping to change that. You might, if it was a teacher or a doctor, might lay a complaint with a disciplinary tribunal, so the teaching council, or similar. You might decide that restorative justice is the pathway that you would prefer. Generally, restorative justice in this country is triggered when there is a guilty plea, and the courts refer the parties to restorative justice.
Oh, okay.
But you can make a community referral. So we may get groups that would prefer to go straight to restorative justice, and that's an option. I think in the end, some groups might decide that they'd just like to meet each other and have a facilitated counselling session so that they can draw on each other's support. And that's really speaking to that community piece. You know, when I, once again, no spoilers, but when the other people in my group contacted me and told me what had happened to them, it changed everything for me, because finally I had community, and that was quite transformative. And I think that a lot of Tika clients will probably, on balance, say, I just want to meet the other people who've been through the same thing that I went through. So that's an option as well. If the vote is split and there's no agreement, no majority agreement or unanimous agreement in the group, if you don't agree with what the other members of the group have said as their preference, the power remains in your hands. You can drop out of the group and wait for other people to potentially come forward and form a new group. Or let's say if there's 8 in the group and 4 want a civil complaint and 4 want a criminal complaint, well, then the groups will split apart and operate as separate groups. You can at any time withdraw your report and take it. Well, it's really important because every survivor's journey is different. Every survivor's journey is different, and every survivor's needs are different. So we need to be, as a platform, responsive to that. So we're not going to say, right, once you've reported with Tika, that's it. You can never take it out of the system and you have to go forward no matter what. That's not our kaupapa at all. So the choice always remains with the survivor.
With the use of technology, how would Tika prevent the false claims, and in the Tika lawyers going through the groups and allocating that time to really comb through, I suppose, and hear the survivors' stories, how does Tika prevent, say, 3 friends jumping on and registering a false claim?
So I think there's several things there, and this is a question we get asked a lot. Often it's the first question we get asked.
Right.
And it's based on false assumptions, to be honest with you, and a lack of understanding of how rare false claims are. So internationally, including Aotearoa in New Zealand, a false claim of sexual harm is about between 2 and 8% of all claims. And when you think about the other statistics, that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men have experienced sexual harm, that's over 1 million New Zealanders have been directly affected by sexual harm at some point in their lives. And the fact that only 7% ever report, and of those people that report, only in between 1 and 2% of cases end in a conviction, you can see that the statistics show that false reports are incredibly rare. nevertheless, they seem to loom very large in everybody's imagination. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a function of rape culture in our
Okay.
society. And it's not based on it kind of, it's the bogeyman of the work that I do, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to loom very large, but it's not really based on reality. So that's number one. However,
Interesting.
we need to maintain an open mind and understand that this may very occasionally happen. So Tika has a number of built-in safeguards. The fact that you have to identify yourself, you have to prove your identity at a very early stage of the journey. And we do that through identity verification software. Anybody who's opened, gone through a relatively complicated bank transaction, opening a bank account, certain kinds of bank accounts, you have to use AML software, anti-money laundering software, where you take a picture of yourself and then your driver's license or passport. So you have to submit that as part of the Tika journey, because otherwise we can't form a lawyer-client privileged relationship with you. So the fact that you have to prove who you are will stop a lot of activity from bad actors.
Right.
And we have a number of other safeguards, including the work of experienced Tika lawyers who know how to tell when there are elements of collusion in a group's reports, right?
Yeah.
But I think the number one thing to point out is that Tika is not, we're not conducting the investigation. Nothing changes about the police's investigation process. If you choose a criminal complaint, you go through exactly the same process as any other group who walked into a police station and laid a complaint. Right. So nothing changes in that investigation process at all. So it's unlikely, incredibly unlikely, that we will see any rise in false reporting, making it through a criminal process, right,
Yeah.
to trial or beyond. I have sympathy for people who ask that question, because it is the first thing that often pops up in people's mind. But I think once people understand the context and the statistics and the Tika process, they will be they will understand that it's unlikely to be a major problem in the system.
You stated earlier that one of the barriers for survivors coming forward could be the naming and shaming aspect of it. Do you think that Tika has good checks in place so that your data doesn't get leaked and everything like that, like the privacy factors of things? Because I guess, you know, you're entering it into this site. A lot of people, again, have those false or like misconceptions of where the data goes and who has access to it.
So
Yeah.
that's a really important question. It kind of formed the basis of our technology build right from moment one, because if people don't trust us, they won't register with us. Obviously, to be inputting your sensitive information into any platform is, you know, a big decision. So we have built the system to be completely secure from moment one. I was in a session with our technology agency yesterday where they were, once again, they've had to do this several times because it's so complex. Yeah. Only Tika lawyers will have access to the information, and it's, you know, I mean, I'd bore you to tears explaining exactly what the steps are, but it's virtually impenetrable.
You say that you guys built it from the ground up, and this is by design, like you say, to protect everyone's privacy. Was there a reason that you didn't, I guess, save money and outsource software? Because there's a lot of AI out there right now. You know, we're trying to use it in innovative ways, and such as this. Was there a reason for that?
That's a really good question. Tika has been an expensive project for exactly that point. So I've often had people saying, oh, well, surely, you know, surely there's software out there that could have done the same thing. Why did you have to build it yourself? We had to build it ourselves so that we knew that it was secure. most data breaches come from two places. They come from human error, and that's why only a tiny group of super users will be able to access the Tika platform through a like multi-step login process. I'm glad it's not me, because it would drive me crazy. But also, the other way that data breaches often happen is through third parties. So it was very important that we did not go shopping for off-the-shelf solutions and cobble together the Tika platform through a number of providers, because each of those providers would have represented a weak point in the data protection. So, I mean, we had no choice really. If we were going to take security seriously, we had to build it from day one with security as the foundation that the entire project was built upon. It would have been cheaper not to, but
yeah, for sure. I think it's cool that you guys have that human element to every aspect of Tika, whereas subsequent software that might follow from you guys, it comes most likely from these big corporations that say they care, but they don't really care, and they just want to be ahead of the curve, kind of like you, and just have their name on it, or like that token kind of.
There's a demand worldwide for this kind of software, because people find the idea of walking into a police station and reporting the harm that's happened for them really challenging, and they don't do it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a demand for online reporting, but versions of online reporting, and there are some that exist. In Australia, for example, there's a couple of online reporting options, and they're relatively popular because they allow people to report in the safety of their own environment. They're not survivor focused or trauma informed. When I describe the build of Tika as being built from moment one on a foundation of safety and security, the safety part also includes, does this feel safe to me as a survivor? Does it feel like I am being supported through this quite challenging journey of writing down what, or submitting what happened to me and the name of the perpetrator? Do I feel like I'm being held through this process in a way that is not re-traumatizing and is less likely to make me, snap the laptop closed in fright? So that as we built the system, the survivor-focused work happened in parallel with security work, and they're meshed together so that they provide an experience for the user that feels safe in all ways. So I think that anybody who is trying to develop processes like this or systems like this will fail if they don't take that survivor-focused and trauma-informed work really seriously. Because when you build something, you want people to use it.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
We will have failed if nobody registers. So we need to look at it from the survivor's point of view, not from our point of view, but from the survivor's point of view, and think, what makes me feel safe as a survivor and therefore more likely to use this tool? So yes, I'm sure that there will be people that want to try and replicate what we do, but they will fail if they don't get that piece right.
For any people watching this or listening to this, do we have a timeline or launch date for Tika so they can start registering?
So the Tika platform is, after a couple of years build, is ready to go live now.
Oh yeah.
So technically it's ready. We are in an energetic fundraising phase to build out our operational capacity. So that means that by early next year, we need to be ready to deliver the legal advice.
Yeah.
So Tika is essentially a small ecosystem of organisations. We have the charity. Parallel with the charity is a legal services firm, essentially a law firm, but one that doesn't charge anything.
Yeah.
And below that, we will shortly have a technology company that will eventually be able to white label the tech and earn money to put back into the charity. So that's the ecosystem. The Tika technology and the charity is ready to go. We need to raise more money to make sure that we can hire the staff we need to support our clients in the legal services space. And we expect that to be in the early part of next year.
Oh, nice.
So anybody who's listening to this who wants it to happen more quickly can get in touch with me and donate. And
yes, I was just about to say that. That's the barrier at the moment.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. And it is for all charities. It's a really tough time in fundraising for any NGO or community organisation. Whenever there is tough economic times, obviously the pool of philanthropic funding tends to shrink a little. So it's challenging, but we believe that Tika is revolutionary. There's nothing like it. It is a New Zealand innovation that can be scaled worldwide. Yep. So we believe that this is something we're supporting, not just for survivors here in New Zealand, but to tackle this, endemic problem of sexual harm worldwide. I think we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds so cool. I've said it a million times throughout this little interview, but it's so exciting to hear, I don't know, just, how the use of technology, again, can be used for good.
There's a lot of nervousness around AI. And I think, we've had some situations where people have been quite shocked because they've misunderstood what we're trying to do. They hear the word AI and they think that we'll be pumping people's sensitive information into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's not that case at all. But it is nice to know that there are cases where large language models are being used, which is essentially what we are being used for good. AI for good. It does exist. And I think Tika is a new and notable example of that. So we're really proud of that.
You've moved across so many roles, from frontline reporting advocacy and now tech for good leadership. Looking back, do you feel like you were always heading on this path?
I did not expect at this time in my life to be a tech startup co-founder.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a shock.
It's so cool.
And it's been a really steep learning curve. But I love learning new things. So I'm hungry for it. I think probably I set myself on this path, a couple of decades ago, when I started to really use my voice in the advocacy space for issues that mainly affect women. Important to note that Tika is open to everybody.
Yes.
Everybody of every gender. But obviously it is an issue that mainly affects women.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I ever knew that I would end up in the tech space, but I think it's probably, I think I've probably been on this path where I wanted to create something that would make a real systems change difference, not just tinkering around the edges.
Yeah.
I think probably I've been on that path for a while, yeah.
Yeah. Without any too much spoilers, would it be okay if we talk a little bit about your book?
Sure.
Yeah. So you write about your mother's story and the generational patterns of control and resilience. How did your own life experiences deepen your empathy for her and influence how you navigate challenges and change today?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I think that as a child, like most children, I had very little insight into what my mother was going through. Although as I describe in the book, as I got older, I could feel the pain to a limited extent. I could feel the kind of pain that she felt. And as I began to understand men's and women's roles in society, I got, more and more insight into her journey. Most people don't most people don't get to read their parents' books. So my children, for example, when they've read my book, have been quite surprised by some things, quite affected by the telling of, the story of my life in my own words.
Yeah.
I didn't have that opportunity with my mother, but I did eventually, as an adult in my 30s, understand the pressures and the gender roles that she, a woman who married in the early 60s, was subject to, and how my father's incredibly controlling behavior will have affected her. And I think the fact that she did the best she could with what she had. So yes, as an adult, I have come to have a lot of adaha for her situation, particularly back in those, decades in the 50s and 60s and 70s, before things started to change a little bit for the better.
Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like you kind of spoke to us as children, we see our parents as like these bulletproof people. We forget that they're humans too, and they've walked their own paths and they have their own challenges in life. So yeah, it is quite confronting, I guess, for your children to go ahead and read your book, but it's definitely necessary to try to break down those systematic kind of narratives, I suppose, right? That like we shouldn't speak about it. We should just hush hush all of that stuff. Your book.
And incredible. They've been incredibly supportive, and they're both adults and they live overseas. But they often text me with questions about the book. Yeah. So they say, now in chapter 3,
yeah,
can you explain this to me? And it's really interesting seeing them engage. I mean, it's quite affecting sometimes because some of it's upsetting for them because they don't want to think of their mum as having gone through some of the stuff that happens in the book. But it's opened up some really interesting conversations with them and really valuable conversations with them. So yeah,
and just strengthening the bond and everything too is quite cool. Yeah, and then they also know that if, God forbid, anything like that happened to them or like any challenges they may face, that you're there for them.
I hope so. I did that often enough in their lives, and demonstrated it often enough. So yes, I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your book blends personal storytelling with an investigative narrative in a really striking way. How did you decide where to weave in those reflective passages?
So there are parts of the book which have a different visual treatment. So they're printed on a different coloured background.
Yes, those ones. Sorry, yeah.
And they're generally in the present tense. They're written in the present tense rather than the past tense.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So those are the most dramatic. They tend to be the most dramatic parts of the book.
Yeah.
And they do deal with some of the darker themes in the book. And I just found that it was quite difficult to weave those moments into a life story. Like they almost had a life of their own, and they were sitting outside the main narrative anyway. That when I wrote it, they didn't quite fit in the main narrative. So I spoke and I wrote them in the first person or in the present tense, which was a departure from the rest of the narrative as well. I don't even know whether I realized I was doing that at the time. But when my editor and I came together and to talk about that as the book took shape, we both agreed that it was a nice layering technique for the story to have those quite dramatic pieces set outside with a slightly different look. And I think it works really well. It wasn't all my idea, but kind of started that process. And then my editor said, okay, this is quite cool. Let's do it this way. Yeah.
Yeah, the visual element is definitely a nice touch because you get so into the book and hearing about your story and then boom, there it is. I
Yeah.
think it's really cool.
Yeah. I tried to make it, tried to do two things with the book. I didn't want to write a book that was very earnest and unreadable.
Yeah.
So I tried to do two things. And it was a delicate dance, a delicate balance. I tried to take care of the reader as they move through those quite confronting parts of the book.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure I was kind of holding their hand tightly through those pieces.
Yeah.
But I also wanted the book to read like a thriller. I wanted people to go, oh my God, I'm so gripped. I need to keep turning the pages. So I'm hoping that I managed to create a balance between those two things.
Yeah, that'd be extremely difficult. Your two minds coming together, like, okay, we're gonna hold your hand, but I also have I have this other vision for it, which is quite cool. Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing anything like that with a
It wasn't
story like yours
easy.
too. Yeah, yeah. Do you think that your father has read your book?
I get asked this question a little bit, and I often wonder where it comes from. Uh, so I haven't talked about this publicly a lot, but my father died last month.
Oh,
So which was, challenging
yeah.
situation in itself, considering everything that's happened and that is laid out in the book. I don't know whether he read it or not before he passed away, and I suppose the best way to answer that is that if you've read the book, you'll understand quite clearly how thoroughly my father centered himself and his needs and his ego in all of our lives,
Yeah.
going right back to the moment we were all born in the 60s and early 70s. And I choose not to center him
Mm,
and his needs or actions, obviously before he died,
yes.
in my life anymore.
Yeah.
So, so the answer to your question is no, I
Yeah.
don't know, and it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I guess that's a good kind of check you have in place for yourself, I guess. Yeah, to remove him from that point of power, I suppose, in your life.
Correct.
For sure. Yeah,
Correct.
that's a nice answer too, because I feel like a lot of people do definitely give too much power to their perpetrators or just people in general in their lives who like that sense of power. And we say that we don't care, but we still choose to put them in that point in our lives, I guess.
I think that I get asked that question because society um, always wants to look at it from the man's point of view,
Mm,
but what it's kind of comes from oh yes, this terrible thing happened to you, Ali, but what about him?
mm,
And I choose not to engage in that.
yeah, for sure. So you led the Me Too movement with such integrity and courage. Seeing the rise of the backlash of those movements online, does that worry you, or do you see it as a part of a broader social change?
I mean, I don't like it.
Yeah, of course,
I
definitely.
don't like it, but I'm old enough and experienced enough to understand that it was inevitable.
Mm,
You can't challenge uh, an accepted system, a system that's been in place for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the patriarchy. You can't challenge that in a explosive and wholesale way, as Me Too did worldwide, without expecting some backlash. I was actually probably a bit naive at the time because, I set up the Me Too NZ reporting project at Stuff with the firm belief that I was doing the right thing. And how could anybody complain about somebody doing the right thing?
yeah.
But people did. So I'm a bit older and wiser now, and I understand that even with Tika, which is a project that will target serial perpetrators, so we're not talking about a person that's just harmed one person, but a person who has created chains of harm, sometimes over decades. There will still be people that don't like this project because it is challenging those established norms, and I think that that's always going to happen to one extent or another. But I think that I am concerned about the way that society is swinging back towards misogyny, of course. Right. I think we have no choice but to continue to challenge that. I was at a writers' festival in Nelson a couple of weeks ago, and after my session, which was a specifically session focused on Me Too, an older woman came up to me. She probably in her 70s, I would have thought, and she said, "Do you think it's worth challenging the patriarchy? Like, is that something that I can do?"
Yeah.
And I said, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But absolutely. It's something I think you should be doing. But I think her question showed how difficult it is for a lot of women still to push back, because it's easy to get shut down or told that you're don't be hysterical, why are you making a fuss? All of those narratives still exist. And, I think young people like yourself are much better than people my age at challenging those norms. I have a 27-year-old daughter, and her generation are excellent in understanding where the boundaries are and should be, and speaking up against them. I think that women my age still have some challenges, because they've been socialized all their lives to shh, and don't make a fuss. I suppose my answer to you is yes, I'm concerned with the backlash and the rise of misogyny, particularly in very young men. But that's no reason to stop doing what we're doing, right?
Sure. Going into Tika with a more eyes wide open view, knowing that there's going to be backlash, other than what we've spoken to about the false registrations and stuff, is there any kind of myths that you'd want to shut down about Tika from the get-go?
I think that the most important information I'd like people to know about Tika is that it's not a name and shame project. So it's kind of the opposite to what I was doing in some ways with the Me Too project at Stuff, where the gold standard was to be able to put the name of the perpetrator on the front page of the paper. That's what we were always working towards. And we were not always able to do that, but in some cases we were. And we needed to make sure that we had our facts absolutely 100% straight. And it'll be the same with Tika, and in fact, it will be lawyers working under the rules of, the Lawyers and Conveyancers Act and the Victims of Crime Act. So it will be even more rigorous, you could say. But we're not naming and shaming. So if somebody puts your name into Tika, nothing will ever happen to it unless several other people do as well, right? Yeah. And your name will never be released unless or until, in the normal way of things, a judge decides to lift name suppression at the end of a court case when you are sentenced. So that's number one. This is not a kind of putting random people's names out in the world
Yeah, like this person may have done this, and then this second person said this, and
Not,
yeah,
not
not
that
at
at
all.
all. So that's important. I think that we've covered this. I think that people are curious and understandably so about the security of the system. And we will be, because we want to be completely transparent, because that is part of the taonga, that will be the trust of our registrants. We will be publishing, when we go live, quite detailed privacy and security information on our website so that people understand how secure Tika is. So I think that's important. And what are the other questions I get asked a lot?
There's got to be so many with
We
something.
do, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do get a lot of really interesting questions. I think that I'd love people to think carefully and do a bit of their own research about the prevalence of false reporting. If that's something that is raised in their head when they think about Tika or learn about Tika, and that's a prime concern of theirs, then I'd really love them to go and look up the statistics and educate themselves on the prevalence of, or lack of prevalence really, of false reports. Because that is something that kind of pops into people's heads straight away. But, and I'd like them to understand that Tika will not be contributing to that at all.
Definitely. And I think we have shifted away from young people like myself doing our own independent research. I think we just go on TikTok, we hear the catchwords we want to hear, and we do with that information as we please. One of the first kind of things we learned when we were learning about sexual offences in uni was that is one of the myths, that it is actually really hard to be successful with a false report and everything like that. So they kind of not grill, but affirm that right there, that this is one of the myths, and it's highly unlikely to be successful. Yeah. Finally, what gives you hope right now in journalism, advocacy, or for the next generation coming through?
I think it is the next generation coming through that gives me hope right now. I am constantly amazed by the sophisticated advocacy that I see from young people, from groups like your group, for example.
Thank you.
Our first national ambassador at Tika is a young woman called Sophie Brown, who was one of the first complainants to come forward in the Mama Hooch case that I told you about earlier.
Wow.
And Sophie has very kindly lent her advocacy to Tika, but at the same time, she has her own advocacy project. It's called Say It Anyway on Gram. So she's not, young people are not waiting around for us oldies to get shit done, right?
Yeah.
They're out there doing it themselves. And I think that there's a huge drive that I see for change and for to do this work in survivors. So most survivors I talk to, whether they've gone through a court justice process or not, just have this burning desire to make change. And I think that's just so brave and admirable, because, you would think if you'd gone through such a painful process or experience that you might just want to put it in a box and never think about it again. But these people want to help other people. And I just find that endlessly inspiring. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was that, so many survivors had told their really private and painful stories to a journalist.
Yeah.
And it would have been wrong not to tell my own story in some way. And I did that in honor of them. I dedicated the book to all of the survivors, because I wanted them to know that they'd spoken out, they'd had the courage to do so, and I was going to too.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's awesome.
mm.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or any message you'd want to share with our audience, especially young people who deeply care about justice and truth?
Look, I would just encourage you to follow the Tika journey. This is something, there are a lot of wonderful organisations in the sector in New Zealand who offer counselling and help for survivors. But Tika is something completely new, and it fills a need that is currently not filled, in that it offers support and information about your legal options, if accountability and justice is something that you want. So sign up for our newsletter.
Yes.
And if you can spare a few dollars every month, please donate, because it will take all of us to come together and support those million New Zealanders who have been affected by sexual harm. That's a lot of people. That's a fifth of the population that form our community. And, I think there's a great there's a will in the survivor community to help others. I think that one of the problems with the current state of the world is that everything is so horrific and it's such a huge bin fire that it's very easy to get cause fatigue. Every time I scroll Instagram, I see some other terrible information about a cause that, I feel quite strongly about, but what can I do?
Yeah.
Tika is something that you can do. We always hope to give you something positive to do to help. So pop onto the Tika website, tika.org. Sorry, I'll start that again. tika.org.nz, and sign up for our newsletters. And when we go live, we will be giving you a multitude of ways that you can help.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it, and highlighting Tika. I think that's everything.
Lovely. Thank you for the opportunity. And if you haven't read No Words for This, it was a bestseller for 18 weeks in the top 5.
Wow, that's really good.
So if you haven't read it, go grab yourself a copy.
Yes, do that, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ara.
Yes, everyone. This is what the book. Go look for it on shelves.